Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. And today we are diving deep into the world of the Ottoman Empire.
Fascinating time and place.
Yeah, to unravel the story of Roxolana,
Yeah.
better known
Hurrem Sultan.
as Hurrem Sultan, a
Sha-
woman
Yes.
of just unbelievable power and influence,
A woman of mystery.
a woman of mystery
And power.
and power.
Yeah.
And we're going to be working with excerpts from her Wikipedia page.
Excellent source.
And what struck me, just right off the bat, is the sheer drama of this woman's life.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
We're talking about a woman who went from being a captive to being the legal wife of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent.
I mean, what a story, right? Suleiman, known for his vast empire, his military achievements, and to even think about becoming his wife, she had to overcome incredible odds, just a complex web of power dynamics.
So let's unpack this journey,
Let's do it.
starting with her early life.
Okay.
She was born Alexandra or Anastasia Lisowska
Mm-hmm.
around 1504 in Rohatyn, Ruthenia, which is now modern-day Ukraine.
Right.
So what can you tell us about her origins? Like, where did she come from?
Well, she was the daughter of an Orthodox priest. So we can kind of imagine that she was leading a very simple life, very different from where she ends up. But then there's this incredibly dramatic shift. Crimean Tatars raid her village, and she's taken captive, and then eventually, transported to Constantinople, that bustling heart of the Ottoman Empire. So you can imagine what a complete upheaval of her life.
It's incredible to think about just the fear and uncertainty that she must have faced at that time.
Of course.
Going from this peaceful village to the center of this vast empire. It's hard to even fathom that transition.
And this is where the name change comes in, right?
Our-
Alexandra becomes Hurrem,
Hurrem.
which means the joyful one in Persian.
Interesting.
And it really makes you think how much of this new identity was, imposed upon her, and how much of it was maybe her trying to find a way to embrace a new chapter in her life.
Yeah, it speaks to like a resilience in her, to not just be completely broken by this experience, but find a way to adapt and even maybe find joy in this new reality.
Absolutely. And that resilience becomes even more apparent when we consider what happens next. She enters the imperial harem,
Wow.
a world, of course, with its own very intricate rules, hierarchies, expectations.
Yeah.
You know.
So I think when people think about the harem, they have these very preconceived notions, often influenced by how it's portrayed in popular culture.
Sure.
What would you say is important for our listeners to understand about the reality of the harem? Because I'm sure it's very different.
It is. We have to kind of get past those very simplistic and kind of orientalist representations of what we think a harem is. I mean, this is a complex social structure. It's housing hundreds of women from various backgrounds, all of them holding these different roles and ranks within this very, specific structure. And while it was a place of confinement, certainly for some, it was also a space where women could gain education, influence, and even wield quite a bit of power, particularly through their relationships with the Sultan and his family.
And so we're talking about Hurrem entering this system.
Exactly.
That's already in place. It's already intricate.
Yeah.
And rather than just, being absorbed into it, she very quickly rises through the ranks and captures the attention of Suleiman himself, becoming his favorite concubine.
And her ascent is truly remarkable. To go from being a captive to holding such a position speaks volumes about her intelligence, charm, and strategic cunning.
So this is where we see this pivotal moment that really rewrites history.
Totally.
Suleiman breaks from centuries of Ottoman tradition, and he marries Hurrem, making her his legal wife, a former slave elevated to the status of Sultan's wife.
I mean, can you imagine the shockwaves that
Oh,
must have gone through the court? It's unprecedented. It really is.
so to kind of just underline that even further, this wasn't just like a symbolic gesture.
No.
He really solidified her significance.
Right.
A new title was created specifically for her, Haseki Sultan.
Exactly. I mean, this is a really important point. They created this title, Haseki Sultan, to formally recognize the elevated status and influence of imperial consorts. And I mean, think of it as solidifying the power of the Sultan's chief consort. So she's granted this level of authority and respect that's just unheard of previously. I mean, it's a testament to his love for her, but also, I think, to her political acumen in securing that recognition for herself.
Oh, Hurrem is not just a beautiful face.
Right.
She's not just a passive recipient of the Sultan's affection.
No.
She's a woman wielding real power, shaping the structure of the Ottoman court.
100%. And her influence wasn't limited to the harem walls. We have evidence of her corresponding with powerful figures like the King of Poland and the Shah of Iran, engaging in diplomatic efforts, and possibly even advising Suleiman on political matters.
Wow. And even her salary is indicative of her elevated status.
Oh, yeah.
2,000 XUs per day.
That's right. I mean, that's more than many high-ranking officials earned at that time.
Yeah.
And that just kind of shows that she wasn't just like a figurehead. Hurrem was involved actively in state affairs.
And I mean, it's just mind-boggling, because we're talking about a woman in that era, a woman who had begun her life as a captive.
Exactly.
And then rose to this level. I mean, that's incredible.
It is a very unique story.
It is. But amidst all this talk of power, politics, and intrigue,
right,
we can't forget the human element of all of this.
Of course.
The story of Hurrem Sultan is, I mean, at its core, love story.
Yep.
We have these letters exchanged between them that reveal this deep and passionate connection.
That's right. And the letters are so compelling because they give us that glimpse, that window into their relationship. You see their intellectual exchanges. They share humor, genuine affection. I mean, there's one letter where he even refers to her as my everything.
Wow.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Talk about powerful feelings, right?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, how much of Hurrem's ambition and her political maneuvering was actually driven by love.
Sure.
A desire to protect her position.
Right.
Secure a future for herself and her children in this system that was constantly in flux.
Right. It's a question that we should definitely keep in mind. I think we always try to categorize these historical figures into these neat boxes, but it's just so much more complex than that.
Of course.
She was a woman of ambition, yes, but she was also a wife, a mother, a lover.
And that's the picture we need to keep in mind.
Exactly. And I think, with great love and power often comes controversy.
Oh, absolutely. And so Hurrem's story is definitely not without its shadows.
Absolutely.
She's accused of ruthlessness, of manipulating events to eliminate rivals and secure her position. So that's a side of her story we can't ignore.
We'll definitely dig into that.
Yeah.
But we also need to examine it critically, considering different perspectives, potential biases. So, yeah, let's dive into that next.
Perfect. So in the next part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
we're going to be looking at those controversies,
Okay.
separating fact from fiction,
Sounds good.
exploring the darker side of Hurrem's rise to power.
Can't wait.
Okay, so we've talked about, this captivating ascent, but history whispers of ruthlessness and intrigue when it comes to Hurrem Sultan. So what are some of those controversies? Like what surrounds her?
Well, one of the biggest, I think, is her alleged role in eliminating rivals.
Yeah.
It's almost legendary, her rivalry with Mahidevran,
Oh, yeah.
another of Suleiman's consorts,
Right.
and mother to Mustafa, his eldest son.
Yeah, and it wasn't just Mahidevran.
Right.
There are accounts that implicate Hurrem in the execution of Ibrahim Pasha, who was Suleiman's grand vizier,
Mm-hmm.
and then, of course, the tragic fate of Mustafa himself,
Right.
who was, accused of treason and executed. I mean, these are
Big accusations.
big, serious accusations.
Serious accusations. And they've really fed into this portrayal of her as, this cunning manipulator orchestrating the downfall of anyone who threatened her position or that of her sons. But here's the thing. We need to remember that much of this is speculation, right?
So are you saying that we have to kind of take these accounts with a grain of salt?
A huge grain of salt. Because think about it. The inner workings of the harem, I mean, those were shrouded in secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there were firsthand accounts from those inside the harem, it's highly unlikely they would ever see the light of day. So most of what we know comes from sources outside the palace.
Well,
Often foreign ambassadors or chroniclers who were relying on gossip and rumors circulating in Constantinople.
so it's like we're dealing with like a big game of telephone,
Exactly.
where the story just gets more distorted,
Totally.
the more it's passed along.
And we also have to remember that these retellings were influenced by the biases of whoever was telling that story. I mean, maybe they were genuinely concerned about her influence, seeing her as a threat to the stability of the empire.
Sure.
But maybe they were also motivated by, prejudice. I mean, here you have a woman,
Especially.
a former slave,
Right.
who had attained this incredible power. So, the question becomes how much of Hurrem's reputation is really based on factual evidence and how much of it is shaped by the perceptions, fears, maybe even the sexism of the people who wrote about her.
It's a huge question.
Right?
I mean, were some of her actions ruthless?
I mean, maybe.
Right.
But maybe they were also the actions of a woman who was trying to protect herself, her children, in a world where power was constantly shifting and there were threats everywhere.
Right. And so we're dealing with this really complex issue
Right.
with no easy answers. But it's a conversation that's so important to have, especially if we want to move beyond those simplistic labels of like hero or villain.
Of course.
And understand Hurrem Sultan as like a very multifaceted individual operating within this very specific historical context.
Absolutely. And speaking of context, this is also a time when the Ottoman Empire is going through huge transformations, right? It's a period sometimes referred to as the Sultanate of Women.
Yeah, I've heard that term,
Yeah.
but I don't really fully grasp it.
Okay.
So what was that, and how did it come about?
So basically, it roughly spans the 16th and 17th centuries, and it's marked by all these powerful women, Hurrem included, obviously, who wielded considerable influence within the Ottoman court. And so some historians argue that this arose partly because Suleiman was often away on these long military campaigns, so he had to rely more heavily on his wives and female advisors. But others say no, it was a result of the changing social dynamics within the empire, that there were just increasing opportunities for women to participate in public life at that time.
So she wasn't just like this isolated incident.
No, not at all.
She was part of like a larger trend of women asserting their agency
Yes.
and influencing the course of events.
Exactly. And I think that's something that's so important to remember. She wasn't operating in this vacuum. She was very much a part of this larger historical movement that really challenged traditional notions of gender roles and how power was structured.
It makes her story even more relevant.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just about one woman's ambition or alleged ruthlessness. It's about this shift in societal structures and the role that women played in shaping that shift.
Exactly. And let's also not forget about, other aspects of her legacy, right? Yeah. Beyond all the controversies, beyond the power struggles. She was a huge patron of the arts and architecture, and she commissioned all these incredible mosques and schools and hospitals.
And her philanthropic work is often overlooked.
Totally.
We have records of her establishing charitable foundations, providing for the poor, for the sick, even building this large soup kitchen in Jerusalem.
The Haseki Sultan Emirate.
Yeah.
It was really famous for how generous it was, providing like hundreds of meals twice a day to people, regardless of their faith or background. So, it's a side of her that often gets lost, I think, in the more sensationalized stories.
It adds another layer to her personality.
Yes, Siri does.
It's not just this cunning, manipulator.
Right. Right. It suggests that, she was a woman of ambition, yes, but also compassion. And that she really understood how to use power, but also the responsibility that came along with that.
So we're getting this complex picture emerging here.
Totally.
A woman who was both feared and admired, a figure of controversy, but also this incredible generosity.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you wonder, like, which version of her is closest to the truth.
Right.
But maybe embracing all of these facets is the closest we'll get to the truth. She just defies categorization.
It's a testament to the fact that history, the figures, it's so rarely black and white.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's what makes exploring these stories so fascinating.
Exactly. It's about digging beneath the surface.
Yes.
Challenging assumptions.
Right.
Recognizing just the nuance and the complexity of the human experience.
Totally. And that's even more so, right, when it comes to Hurrem Sultan, because her story has continued to be told and retold, reinterpreted and reimagined through different art forms, through popular culture.
And that's a great point to transition to.
Yeah.
So let's delve into that.
Okay.
How has her story resonated through the ages?
Yeah.
From these historical accounts to artistic depictions to modern day television dramas. Let's see how her legacy lives on.
Let's do it.
So it's amazing to think about, her story just enduring through these centuries.
It really is.
We talk about, her rise, the controversies, the influence.
Yeah.
But how has she been perceived in art, in popular culture? Like how does her legacy kind of live on?
It's so interesting to see how her image has evolved over time, even starting during her lifetime. We have these European artists who are creating portraits of her.
That's interesting.
Without ever having access to the harem, obviously.
Right.
But these depictions, I mean, sometimes even by famous artists like Titian, contributed to this whole mystique surrounding her.
So it's like her image almost took on this life of its own, separate from the actual historical accounts.
Absolutely. You know, these portraits often emphasized her beauty, her elegance, her regal bearing, which really reflected how the West was viewing her power and her influence. So they played a role in kind of constructing this legend of Hurrem Sultan.
You mentioned how her story is retold and reinterpreted.
hmm
Can you give us some specific examples of how she appears in art and literature?
Yeah, I mean, one early example is this French tragic play La Sultane by Gabriel Bounin, which was first performed in 1561. And it really portrays her as cunning, ambitious, but it also, highlights her love for Suleiman and the struggles that she faced within the harem.
So it seems like that duality, like the cunning and the genuine affection, that's like a recurring theme.
Totally. And it even continues to this day. You know, in recent years, we've had Turkish television series like Muhteşem Yüzyıl, which is Magnificent Century in English,
Right.
that have really captivated global audiences. And Hurrem is a central character, and the series, while it is fictionalized, it does delve into her complex personality, her relationships, her role in shaping Ottoman history.
And so these portrayals, even if they are fictionalized, they're still sparking these questions and these discussions
Of course.
about her legacy.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, she embodies themes that resonate across cultures and time periods, right? Ambition, love, power, the challenges faced by women, especially women who are defying societal expectations.
It makes me wonder, thinking about those challenges, what could we learn if we had more perspectives from inside the harem itself?
Oh, that's such a great question.
What if we could actually hear from the women who lived and worked alongside her?
I mean, it would be incredible, wouldn't it? I think historians are increasingly trying to grapple with that question. Like, how do we go beyond these male-dominated narratives? And how do we seek out those voices that were hidden, the stories that were so often silenced?
It'd be so rich just to get a glimpse into, like, the day-to-day realities of the harem.
Right.
The relationships between the women, the alliances, the rivalries.
Exactly. And we might find that she was a mentor, right, to some, a confidant to others. We might even find evidence of her vulnerabilities, the sacrifices she made, the struggles that she dealt with internally.
It would really humanize her.
Yes, absolutely. It would allow us to see her as not just this political figure, but as a real woman, navigating this incredibly complex web of relationships, responsibilities. And we would gain a much deeper appreciation, I think, for the challenges that she overcame and the choices that she made.
And it's just a reminder that history it's not static.
Right.
It's this ongoing conversation, a process of discovery, reinterpretation.
That's the beauty of it. As we find more sources, as we ask new questions, as we challenge these narratives that are out there, we can continue to paint a richer and more nuanced picture of the past.
So for our listeners out there, if this deep dive has kind of piqued your interest,
Yeah.
what would you recommend as a starting point?
Well, I always encourage
Exploration.
people to learn about the history of the Ottoman Empire, particularly in the 16th century.
Right.
There are so many excellent books and documentaries out there
Right.
that explore this whole concept of the Sultanate of women, which gives you a lot of context for understanding her rise. And don't be afraid to seek out those different voices, those stories that may not have been given as much attention. Look for the scholarship that's challenging those traditional narratives and shedding light on the experiences of women, in this world.
And remember, history's full of surprises. So as you delve deeper, you might uncover perspectives that completely reshape your understanding of Hurrem Sultan.
Totally. And that's what keeps it so fascinating. Every time you do one of these deep dives, you always find new things, new discoveries.
That's right.
New insights.
So keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep an open mind, because you never know what treasures you might find.
Exactly.
And that is it for this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Tell us what you think about this episode. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.